Hello everyone, Kirk here as promised with a special bonus episode for you all, a Thanksgiving treat. A little while back on the show, I mentioned that I had been playing and loving a role-playing game called Kingdom Come Deliverance II. A bunch of people had written in over the course of the year to tell me that I should play this game, that I would love it, saying that it was just the kind of grounded, narratively complex and frictional game that I'm always saying I like. I finally listened to them, I installed it, and I quickly fell in love with it. I found myself falling under this game's weird spell. So thanks to everyone who recommended that I play this game. As I was playing, I was talking with my friends Tom Bissell and SEIJI Burns, two writers I've known for a long time, each of whom had also been playing the game. Tom, many of you will know, he's an author, a literature critic, he's a video game writer, he's written down everything from Uncharted 4 to The Vanishing of Ethan Carter to Gears of War. Lately, he's been working in TV more, and he wrote the final 3 episodes of the tremendous second season of Star Wars Andor. We actually had him on Triple Click just recently to talk about that show. Matthew, meanwhile, will also be familiar to longtime listeners. He's been, I guess, on the show many times going back to the split screen days. He worked in various development roles at big studios in the 2000s and 2010s. He worked on series like Halo and Call of Duty before joining Zachtronics, where he wrote and continues to write music and did narrative design and writing for a number of those terrific games, those machine-building puzzle games that they make at Zachtronics. He also wrote and directed the visual novel Eliza, which is great, and kind of predated ChatGPT, but it's all about AI-driven therapy, and it's really more relevant than ever today. It'd be a great one to play, I think, really thought-provoking, and just a really nice game. Matthew's recent novel Process is also really cool. It was my one more thing recently, and I really enjoyed that book. So I was playing this game, I was talking with these two guys, and I realized that I really wanted to talk about this game on Triple Click in a substantive way, like have an actual conversation about it, not just rant about how it's really cool for a while during a one more thing. It's just such an unusual and interesting game. It demands conversation. There's so much to talk about. And sometimes this just happens on Triple Click. You know, one of us gets into a game and the other two hosts just don't have time for it, or they're not interested, or whatever. And that's fine. I mean, that happens. It's not like we're going to start making episodes like this all the time. This is just kind of one of those stars aligning kind of situations where Tom and I were chatting and we kind of just came up with the idea of, hey, why don't we just record something ourselves with Matthew talking about this game? And then Tom said, oh, you know what? You should have my friend Liam on as well. He and I played through the game together. He's really funny. He'll be a great guest. And I'm like, Liam? Okay, who's Liam? And he says, oh, Liam McIntyre, the actor. And I'm like, oh, okay. So Liam McIntyre is a well-known actor. He played the lead in Spartacus Vengeance. He's been on TV. He's in a lot of video games and animation. He does a lot of voice work. You'll hear why he gets hired for a lot of voice work the minute he starts talking. And he'll actually be playing Logan himself in Insomniac's upcoming Wolverine game. So I said, sure, that sounds great. I'd love to know what Wolverine thinks of this game. So the four of us hopped on a Zoom call and had the conversation you're about to hear. Now, what is this game? Kingdom Come Deliverance II came out earlier this year. It was developed by the Czech studio Warhorse Games. It's already been a big success per Warhorse. It has sold 4 million copies as of November. It is dedicated to an unusually grounded story set in 15th century Bohemia, which was the name of the region of Europe that we now know as the Czech Republic. You play as Henry of Skalitz, the same character from the first game, a squire and bodyguard to Hans Capon of Perkstein, an annoying and occasionally annoyingly charming noble. The two of them are on a diplomatic mission that quickly goes incredibly wrong. After the prologue, you will find yourself naked and penniless with only your wits to get by, but then over the course of the next many dozens and dozens of hours, you'll build Henry up to be a master swordsman, famous blacksmith, a spy, a thief, and a diplomat who plays an integral role in a series of increasingly complex conflicts between the regional lords and the forces of two warring kings, the current rightful king, Wenceslaus IV, to whom Henry and Hans are loyal, and the Hungarian Sigismund of Luxembourg, also known as Sigismund the Usurper. Both of those kings, of course, real people. This whole thing really happened. The backdrop is real, even if some of the specific characters are amalgams or are fictionalized. As for the gameplay, it is a first-person action RPG. It feels a little bit like Skyrim, just in the basic movement, the way the world is all simulated. It's a little bit like Red Dead Redemption 2 in its groundedness, its slowness, its dedication to historical realism. And it's a bit like The Witcher 3 in its massive script, its sprawling and ambitious story, and the constantly surprising side quests. They never go where you're expecting. There's always some new complication, and each of them is very well written and entertaining. All right, that is enough from me. Before we get started, I want to play my 3 temporary co-hosts introducing themselves just so you can know who each guy is, though they all sound very different. And I do want to note that Tom recorded on AirPods because that's what he had, so his vocal quality isn't quite on the level. And actually, if you compare the way that his recording sounds to Liam's recording, you could see just what a difference it makes if you have a really great microphone, and also if your voice sounds like Liam McIntyre's.
Hey, I'm Liam McIntyre.
This is Tom Bissell.
And this is Matthew SEIJI Burns.
All right, with that, let's get into our conversation about Kingdom Come Deliverance II. All right, guys, welcome to this special episode of Triple Click. I'm so excited that you're all here, and I'm very excited to talk with you about this game.
Excited to be here as well. This is the most absolutely nutso game that I've probably ever played in probably about 50 years. Well, maybe not that many years, but a while.
So, Tom, you and Liam played this game together. Can you just describe to listeners a little bit how you played it? Because Matthew and I played it like normal people, hunched over a computer in the darkness alone.
Oh,
but the two of you actually played together. How did that work?
I had heard a lot about how wonderful the game was. I think I watched Skill Up's review, and I tried the first Kingdom Come. I'd heard it was weird. I heard it was very obtuse and kind of hard to get used to, and I bounced off the first one real hard. But the Skill Up review I watched, and I thought, okay, this sounds pretty interesting. And so I proposed it to Liam. Liam and I kind of have a running date where, once or twice a month he comes over and we play something till 3 a.m. And we fired up Kingdom Come. And I remember we were like, this is kind of remarkably interesting and really strange. It doesn't feel like anything. I think the joke we made is that if you thought Red Dead Redemption 2 was too fast-paced, this is the game to really go to. And Liam, back me up. We kind of hated it at first.
It was aggressively what it was. I don't think I've ever played a game that was so unabashedly you're getting this experience no matter what. There is no amount of playtesting that we will do that will change our mind. It was just... Look, I haven't played a game like this since Control, where for the first 2 weeks of playing Control, I actively hated it, every moment of it. I started playing it off and on, and I was like, I just stopped playing this. I hate this. Until it magically clicked at some point. And this was the same. Tom and I, we'd set up these times to play the game, and then... So we'd sit down, we'd play it for 30 minutes, you would walk endlessly through a forest, nothing would happen, you would see an encampment, and you're like, I know how RPGs work, let's run to that. It's an empty encampment. There must be a quest. There's no quest. Why are we doing this to ourselves? And we did that for way too long, and we interchangeably, we'd be like, we got to try something else, and we'd go to Power Wash Simulator or something, and then inevitably, it was so committed to itself. Once you started to invest, the sunk cost became, enriching, and it became better and better and better the longer you invested in it.
A rare case of the sunk cost fallacy helping you discover something wonderful.
The same thing happened to me. I almost quit as well, and the only reason I stuck to it was because Tom told me that I should keep playing.
Nice.
But it was that opening. I was like, am I watching a Kojima game? It's talking at you for 20-minute blocks at a time. And then, isn't that first mission where you really get to do something? You just pick up a bunch of flour or something similar and walk it into a storage closet. And you're like, okay, here we go. And there's all right, thanks for that. Here's 20 more minutes of backstory. And you're like, wait, what, that was it? Unbelievably incredibly brave way to start a game.
Yeah, that is definitely true. This is a very unusual game. I think anyone listening to this, I'm guessing that a lot of people listening to this will already know what this game is, what Kingdom Come Deliverance II is. At the same time, I think we could probably explain it a little bit, aside from just it is a historical, medieval role-playing game. So I thought one way that we might do that would be to each tell a specific story of something that illustrates how unusual this game is. And I'll start. This was something fairly early on in the game. You two are describing, or all three of you actually are describing these like incredibly, the period of the game where you have like nothing, you're naked, you're running around in the woods, you have no idea what you're supposed to be doing, which can go on for a very long time depending on how directed you are and how fast you are about like going and talking to the blacksmith who gives you a place to sleep and gives you some clothes, or just wandering around in the woods, which I did for a while. But once you kind of get going, especially with the blacksmith, who is one of the kind of main quest givers you go to talk to, he gives you somewhere to sleep, he kind of gives you a job, you get a little bit started, and then an early quest that he gives you has you going to another town. You kind of talk to the officials of that town, and I went and did this. This was a kind of standard side quest for this kind of a game. I talk to them, and they say to me, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to figure out where this crashed down wagon is, and we're going to find these guys that went missing. We can't ride out now, so we're going to ride out in the morning. So come find us, and then we'll go. So then I think, okay, cool, great. And then I go off and do 7 other things and play for another few hours. And then I come back, and the guys are sitting there. And I'm like, hey, all right, can we go? And they say, we already went. Why didn't you show up? You know, we got up early in the morning. We were going to go check it out, and you weren't there. So we went and did it. And then they explained to me the entire rest of the quest as it would have happened if I had been there. And I realized, like, oh, so with side quests of this game, if they tell me to do something on a time frame, I have to do it. You would think I would have learned, but then actually multiple times in this game that has still gotten me where I'm supposed to go find something and I'm too late and someone finds it before me, because time matters in this game in a way that I didn't realize. So that is my one unusual thing from this game.
I haven't experienced this personally, but I was reading some other people's experiences of the game, and one thing I didn't even consider was like there's different points in the game where you have to have like a charisma off with someone, where someone you've got to embarrass people or whatever it might be, or like try to show off in front of people, and apparently you'd poison their food the night before, and then the next day they will be incapacitated and not show up themselves, or get steal their clothes and they'll have nothing to wear. And I was like, oh my God, you can do that? That's mad.
Someone was saying you can poison, I believe you can poison a horse's food. Like you can poison an apple and feed it to a horse and it makes the horse die. Am I right about that? I might be making that up.
Sounds
I
right.
guess it's the kind of thing that is at least possible in this game.
I think for me, it was the mission where you have to give someone diarrhea to beat them in a horse race. When I thought, okay, this is pretty special. And I remember early there was a mission where it seemed like pretty straightforward, go get something and bring it back. But somewhere along the way, I was offered a kind of side hustle. And forgive me for not remembering the particulars. It was a while ago that I played this. But I remember there was some side hustle that came up, and I wound up completing the mission in what felt like a pretty unusual way. And when I came back to the quest giver, they talked about the unusual way that I completed it. And then I remember just thinking, oh my God, like it knows when you don't fulfill a mission under the traditional auspices of mission fulfillment, and then it knows to comment on it. And then it's got enough variety in the actual script where it's able to roughly guess, not only did you do it in an unorthodox way, it hints at the way you accomplished it. And I remember thinking, oh boy, this feels like a game that's really worth digging into and messing with. And I wound up poisoning a lot of people's horses. I would sneak into an enemy camp that I couldn't beat traditionally while they were all asleep, and I'd poison their wine jug. And then I'd just go crouch in the woods and wait and watch them wake up in the morning, have their morning wine, and then they'd all pass out. And then I would come kill them all. It was like, it just doesn't operate like any other game I've ever played.
Matthew, how about you?
Yeah, it's so reactive in that way that you were just talking about, Tom, and people will comment on you as you walk by, what status you are as well. And so the thing that I'll always that happened to me throughout my playthrough is that when you take a bath or use any kind of bathhouse services, it just automatically takes all your clothes off. And then it doesn't really tell you that it does this. So you're like, oh, thanks for the bath, and you run outside and you start running through town or running through the woods. And then you'll be walking through a village and somebody will be like, hey, you should put some clothes on. Like, what are you doing? And you'll go to your inventory and you'll be like, oh, that's right. I forgot that like when I take a bath, it just takes your clothes off. And it doesn't really remind you. It just like is kind of a joke, I think, maybe on the part of the developers, that you have to like remember to do these kinds of things. I was telling Kirk that happened to me, and Kirk said, well, I always remember to put my clothes back on after that.
I shouldn't overstate that. I do forget sometimes, actually. I fall for it sometimes and realize that I'm walking around in a towel.
We just had that thing as we played last night where we were walking around and we accidentally drew a sword and went up to like a tray, or just a person wandering around the roads between cities, as they tend to do. And they just aggressively like, put that down, put that sword down right now. And you're like, whoa, all right, buddy. And then when you say, all right, that's a much better way to behave. And you're like, dude, you know, I saved a kingdom. Do you know who I am? And it was just, but it was, they have so much variety in the, and that same interactivity, that's that real, the world feels, its banality, I guess, makes the world feel more alive. I think a lot of games tend to, like, tiptoe towards the line of just regular stuff happens, but it's not exciting, so they have to fill it with other things. Whereas this game has so much, it's not quite a life simulator, but it is as close as it can to just be, you know, walk around and stuff that would happen will probably happen, and stuff that wouldn't happen probably won't happen.
I think there's really something to that in that, you know, I mean, Matthew, you said maybe they're playing a joke on the player, but really I think that each of those little things you have to do, that you have to remember, even just having to eat or, you know, I don't know, take a bath or clean off your clothes, those kinds of things, you put them all together and it kind of lowers the peak excitement level that this game can really have, or like the possibility space kind of lowers until you're just in what feels much closer to the regular world. Like if you think about a game like Skyrim, the most exciting thing that can happen to you in Skyrim right at that moment could be like a dragon flying out of the sky and then suddenly you're like fighting a god and like shooting it out of the air, right? Like the possibility for excitement is really, really high. So as a result, when you're doing little boring stuff, there's like a huge level of contrast. Where in this game, most of the time, the most exciting thing that can happen is like maybe you get in a fight with a bandit or like two bandits, and the violence isn't like that exciting. It's sort of weird. So most of the time, it's like attenuated the level of excitement that you can have. And so all of those little fiddly things don't feel like distractions. They feel like pretty vital parts of the game. And then when you're doing something like you're at a wedding and you're sneaking alcohol up to some guys that you think probably shouldn't have that alcohol, like it feels kind of exciting because it's the most exciting thing you've maybe done in that hour. Does that make any sense?
I have a theory on all this stuff. It's a game about decisions in a lot of ways, and it's a game about the choices that you make on a moment-to-moment basis matter, and the choices you make within the story matter. So they've designed the game. Technically, you can kind of scum save your way through it like you would with a traditional sort of RPG. But because saving is kind of a pain in the ass, and because you need to actually make or buy the potions to do the saving, and they're
Can we talk about savior schnapps after this? I have a whole lot to talk about with that.
Yeah,
go on.
So it discourages the kind of, I fucked that up, let me try it again, gameplay that most games like this sort of rely on. And because of that, every decision you make, even drawing your sword, feels really weirdly consequential.
Yeah.
And I really admire how the consequentiality goes from your choices as Henry, the character whom you inhabit, to whether or not you remember to put your clothes on, to whether or not you remember to eat. Have you slept enough? Do you sell? How quickly you sell stolen goods? Like it takes a long time for the heat to fall off stolen goods before you can sell them again. It really discourages the kind of mischief making that you do in other RPGs. And it makes you really think, God, boy, I could go steal that thing, but this whole town could be in an uproar if I do that. And its mechanics, more than any other game I can think of, really enforces the idea that what you do matters.
I think nothing sums up my experience of the game with Tom than Save Your Schnapps as an idea and how it affects the game. Like from the get-go, you're like playing this game. It's egregiously banal. Like it's unsympathetically plain in its delivery. It's everything is very.
You are walking through the woods and nothing is happening.
Nothing. Yeah. It's so real world. You're not getting gored by an animal randomly or having some boss fight or a dragonfly. So you're just walking around and that's it. Maybe you play dice.
A wolf might attack you.
That's
wolf
true.
Wolves might attack you, and that's a nightmare because they're impossible to beat at this. Anyway, but like, so then you have a limited resource of saving, which is, I guess, the only real part of the game that you're like, okay, it's probably outside of the regular world, but it's so the concept of Save Your Schnapps is like you have a limited resource of saves, fine, which also enforces part of that philosophy that Tom's talking about living in the world and not finding ways to break it like you do most RPGs. And when you save a game, and that's the only way you can save a game, except for very rarely when you complete a quest or something like that. So you could be, as we did during our hate playing version of that period of the game, like we finally got to some small important mission in a different town. And after multiple tries, maybe 10 tries, because the combat is also so opaque and hard to understand to begin with, and eventually when you master it, you feel like a god. But we finally beat whatever ruffian or rarely regular dude we've had to fight, and felt like kings for the first time in the game probably. And then Tom just absolutely beelined it across the countryside and ran straight off a cliff and died. And we had to go back about 2 hours of gameplay, and we were both like, we're never playing this again. It's impossible to do that again. And then because at the very start you meet that woman, you end up staying with that, I can't remember her name, that you stay with. You sort of first
the healer,
and the healer, and she shows you the how to make potions and all that stuff, and that is again an impossibly complex. It involves like a sand timer and all these kinds of things, and you're like, why is this so hard? And you have to collect resources, but then if you walk around with them for too long, they degrade and you can no longer use them. So just the process of saving the game is a nightmare and impossible and inscrutable. And getting a save potion is so hard to master, but that we just never did until an event like that happens where you just lose 2 hours of progress because, a rush of blood. And now Tom, as we play, has to have, is it 25 Save Your Schnappses at any given time? Like I had to talk him down from making more as we were playing last night. Where I'm like, we've only got a couple of hours. We cannot spend all of those hours crafting Save Your Schnapps. And he was not very happy with that decision, I don't think.
That's funny. Save Your Schnapps is kind of a mechanic that can stand in for a lot of things about the game, where at first it feels really thrilling, and it's this really frictional thing. You only have a few of them. You have to really plan your saves out. And then over time, I found, at least, because you can quit and it will save as well. And there were times where I would just quit and save and then reload the game to get a free save.
Wait, what?
What?
If you quit, it saves?
Am I blowing you guys' minds?
What?
Well, you can save and quit, and it does the same thing as a Save Your Schnapps and saves at any point.
No, it doesn't.
I didn't.
Tom, does this reduce the amount of Save Your Schnapps that you think you need to carry around?
I thought it says you'll just lose your progress.
Matthew, did you know you could, when you quit, it saved?
When you quit to the main menu, it does save in one slot, a single slot.
There's a save slot that's just for when you quit, and it's save and quit. You don't have to. You can just quit to the menu without saving if you don't want to save whatever just happened. But so I would abuse that. But that's it's kind of a crappy thing to do. I mean, you guys are playing it a way better way by really embracing Save Your Schnapps, only because, you have to quit the game and get back in. It totally kills the rhythm. And I actually appreciate the restriction that Save Your Schnapps puts on you. But then again, now that I've played more, I have so much Save Your Schnapps. It's so easy to save. I've bought beds in every single inn and have infinite money because I'm so powerful. So there's this really significant curve with this game where once you get through the part we've been talking about, like the intro and really just the first act, it stops being broke medieval peasant simulator, and it starts being rich, powerful medieval knight errant simulator. And it kind of, the narrative also kind of opens up at that point, the main storyline, and it gets much more, there's a lot more intrigue. You're playing much more of the kind of, manipulating different lords and trying to actually shape the outcome of this region. So that's actually an interesting part of this game, and something that I think we should talk about and kind of emphasize is that for all that we're talking about, these parts of the game where you're walking around in a field where like one pack of wolves is the difference between life and death, you finally get a halfway decent sword and it's the most exciting thing that ever happened. You're constantly at the alchemy, station trying to just brew up more stuff. Or like me, I mean, I did a lot of farming. There's a lot of kind of podcast, like listen to a podcast and just do archery for like an hour while my strength slowly goes up. Like there's a lot of that at the beginning. And then the game actually becomes a very different game halfway through. And I'm kind of curious how that was for the three of you. Matthew, how was that arc for you as you were kind of playing from the first act into the second act?
Yeah, so I definitely spent like the first couple hours just dying at every opportunity because you're so disempowered when you start the game and anything will kill you immediately. And so I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to like afford anything or like get anywhere. So what I did was I just spent maybe like 2 or 3 nights, like real nights, just playing the game and brewing potions. just like I spent like the first like 10 hours of gameplay just like in that hut brewing potion after potion, and then I would bring them into
Walter Whiting it.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I would bring them into town, sell them. And then one time I spent like an hour or two brewing potions, and I was going into town to sell them, and there was a bandit there, and I just died, no save, and just gone. And I was like, this is it, I'm done. Like I'm not playing this anymore. And then I was like, well, I'll play. Okay, fine. And then the next day, and so once you kind of like bootstrap yourself into getting some money, and then like knowing that you can get money for stuff, it does kind of start getting a little bit easier, and it starts kind of turning into a little bit, I want to say like more of like a normal RPG.
I think that's safe to say.
By the end, because there's like a little bit more emphasis on just like quest stuff and things like that. There's conveniences you can learn to do to take care of your equipment. Like normally you have to like bring your equipment to someone to repair it. You have to like get your clothes washed and stuff. But then later you can find like items that'll do it, and you can like skill up in doing all those things yourself. So there's a huge delta between when you start the game and then when you finish the game, between like how disempowered you feel versus how powerful you feel.
Yeah, and it really takes its time getting you to that too.
Yeah, it does.
I want to say that I never felt particularly powerful because I never really learned how to fight very well. I constantly spending thousands of coins on repairing my armor because I didn't bother to get the perks to learn how to do any of that stuff myself.
Well, I was a ring-in for a couple of weeks, right? Be like,
yeah, whenever I got to a fight I couldn't pass, I just call Liam at like 9:30 at night and go, can you just please come over and beat this guy for me? And I couldn't. It took me 30 to 40 hours to get the hang of sword fighting. And then I finally got it. But every consequential fight in the game, Liam basically did for me.
In fairness, the sword fighting system is maybe one of the weakest points of the game, in my opinion, anyways. I think it's really cool what they're doing. I think it's really well designed, and I love that directionality plays a role. To explain this to listeners who have not played the game, when you're in a sword fight with a guy, you get a kind of new reticle that floats over him, and it shows the 4 cardinal directions, left, right, up, and down. And then depending on which weapon you're using, you kind of pick your swings. So if I'm playing with a controller, it's fine with a mouse and keyboard, but I'm playing with a controller. You kind of flick the stick to the right arrow lights up on screen, and then when you hit the trigger, Henry will swing from the right. And then depending on where your opponent is holding his weapon, he'll maybe be able to counter you or master stroke you and hit you immediately. And there's a lot of kind of strategy to the position of your weapon and to reading the position of your opponent's weapon. And that's really cool, especially because the master stroke, which is a kind of an immediate parry that always works. Basically, if you time it right, you hit their sword and then stab them really quickly. Like that is a very effective way to get through sword fights, at least if you're a sword fighter, which my Henry is. I like that all in theory. There's just kind of like a floatiness to it. I think like the sticky friction, to use Tim Rogers' term, or like whatever you want to call it, the physical feel of the combat, for me at least, doesn't quite gel. And then as a result, I always feel like one step more removed from the combat than I want to. But I'm curious, Liam, it sounds like you're a defender of the combat, so maybe you feel differently.
Is it Mordhau? Is that the game that has a similar kind of combat system? Am I thinking of the right game?
I haven't played that.
Yeah, there's a couple of like sword fight simulators where it is more based on, stances and positioning and more of the puzzle of a sword fight.
Liam is an actual master swordsman, just to throw that out
That's
there.
probably a stretch, but I know how to swing a sword around a little bit from Spartacus. But
Oh, okay. So you can sword fight in real life.
Don't spread that around. My biggest fear after that show was that people would just walk up to me in the street and be like, "Want a sword fight, mate? Think you're tough?" And I'm
Slap
like, "I do
your
not."
face with their
Yeah, I know,
gauntlet.
on guard, sir. And I was like, "Good lord, no." But I know a little bit about it anyway. But it wasn't even so much the realism, because I agree. Like as a, it didn't feel weighty and heavy, but it was much like everything. We'll get into the concept of Gustav, which we imagined as a character, as a production team member whose job it was to say, that seems too fun, we should take it out as a part across all of the game.
Gustav.
Yeah, Gustav would
He's just looking over everyone's shoulder. At all
Absolutely. He'd turn up. He's like, I don't know. I think someone might like doing that. Take it out. And so I felt like he was like, look, this combat we don't have time to develop a more opaque, harder to understand combat system. So we'll have to go with this one. But but again, like the game itself, first time you play it, you're like, I have no idea what this is. This is madness. It's impossible. And then the puzzle of it, for me at least, as I started to understand it, became fascinating. Instead of usual games like, Spider-Man or something, or even like a Bethesda game where you just attack a guy mercilessly and hope to, maybe block occasionally or, counter. There was a real, it felt more authentic to combat of the time, which was like, wait some more, see him reposition yourself, wait. Okay, there's my shot, or I'll block that one, dive away, duck in, attack him, block, counter that. He's foolishly tried to attack me on this side. I'm prepared for that. I'll master strike you. And then there was combos you could learn and integrate, which were very hard to pull off. But because the combat was hard and strange and unusual to your conventional, square and triangle kind of, combat these days, it meant that I got good at a single battle, with one person, and that was, I felt like I'd really done something, like I'd really outthought my opponent, but then you'd face 2 or 3 opponents, and it was near impossible because you couldn't do that to so many people, so you try to funnel them in places, and I don't know, I felt like it offered a very different way to appreciate combat than almost all games that I've played, certainly in that space, have provided. And much like the rest of the game, was just a little bit weird enough to make you go, okay, let's do this.
No, and I can't disagree with any of that. I mean, that's totally true, and it is so different and it's so specific, and they are trying to do something, tied to reality in a way that's really cool. And I really like all of that.
Speaking of tied to reality, Kirk, it sounds like you did archery quite a bit.
I did, yeah. Just like the archery competitions. And that was going to kind of be my go-to for combat for a while too, which was really useful, except that it takes so long to switch weapons that I would see some bandits on the road and get off my horse and get out my bow, and they wouldn't see me, and I'd think, okay, hang on. And then I'd kind of line up the one guy and I'd shoot, and it would clearly do a lot of damage to him, like he'd be limping. But then he and his friend would start coming for me with their swords. And then I'd have to kind of try to get my sword out, and I would just get absolutely got while in the middle of switching weapons. And it just wound up in a kind of yakety sax running away, getting my sword out so I could turn back around and try to fight situation. And then in those early hours, like you were talking about, Liam, I mean, even taking on 2 guys is pretty much suicide. So, but anyways, yes, to answer your question, Matthew, I did a lot of archery at first, and I still do the competitions, but I don't use it that much in combat anymore.
And you were okay with it? Because I had problems with first of all, there's no targeting reticle or anything like that, right? It's just, you're just there with your bow or your crossbow if you're using a crossbow, and lining up the target and accounting for the dip of the arrow and everything. You just have to eyeball it. There's no help at all. I
like that a lot. It doesn't give you that drop-off reticle that you get in so many other games where there's, arrow drop-off. I really got a feel for it. It's the kind of thing, I mean, I've shot I don't know how many, some embarrassing number of arrows now, because like I said, I just would spend an hour listening to some podcasts and just shooting. And I got so good at it. I mean, you just get a feel for it. But it's cool because it kind of feels a little bit like real archery, where there isn't a reticle in my eyeballs. Like when I'm doing actual archery, you do just kind of line it up a little bit up and to the left from where you're holding the arrow, and then you let it fly and see where it goes, and then kind of adjust from there.
I can hear Gustav saying that there's no reticle in real life. Why would you put a
Gustav
reticle in the game?
definitely has some thoughts on archery.
I know in my heart that a designer put the reticle in, and he was like, "What? Hey, whoa, hang
Gustav
on.
what is that?
Take that right out. Take that right out now." Tom and I, we desperately tried to make gunpowder work. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Tom. Where, for the same reason, you were like, let's waste a guy. Let's just go like Tony Montana. Let's just kill a bunch of dudes with guns. And it just never quite worked out the way we wanted it to, Tom.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, so to explain to listeners, there are guns in this game, technically. They're like kind of portable little cannons. These are very prototypical firearms. That's like a stick with a little barrel on the end it's like a little cannon that you're carrying around. I watched a combat tutorial video. There's a lot of great tutorials on this game on YouTube, by the way. If anyone is playing this and wants to get some great tips, like people will tell you things that you can do that the game does not explain very well, like related to blacksmithing, related to combat, a lot of things that you aren't really taught in the tutorials. And then it was this guy being like, oh yeah, you can totally use a gun in combat, and it showed him using it, and just the amount of setup time, like lighting the fuse, and then the fuse is burning down, and he kills one guy, and then he has to put it away and get out his sword. It was an incredibly cumbersome process.
I think it's like 17 seconds to reload that thing. It's just some crazy.
Yeah. No, you get one shot. It's an opening gambit kind of.
What was that mission that we had, Tom, where we were in the underbelly of the city in like the sewers or whatever, and we had that fight. We were trying to. Oh, what was it? We were trying to get something from this.
It was the tax guy. It was
Yes.
the tax guy's ledger or something.
Oh, I have that quest right now. I haven't done it.
And we were trying.
There were 8 guys in the tunnel, and that was like a 3-night engagement where we were just trying to get past a single fight. It was really bad.
Because we had all these schemes, which was like, we'd set it up, we'd drink all the potions, we'd set up the cannon ahead of time. Invariably, I'd be like, it's not that button, it's the other button. Oh, Liam, you screwed it up again. Have to start up again, drink the thing. And is this pre-savior schnapps as well, where we had like a terrible save point and we couldn't improve on it, so we had to drink so every time you'd be like, is this the one? Should we be bothered spending the next 5 minutes drinking potions in the hope that we actually get somewhere? But then again, because the game is so horrifically hard, that when we did get there, I don't know if I have had a rush like that for in games for so long, because it is so mundane. But when you do succeed, because like you said, like they've lowered your kind of range of emotions in a way. When it does spike, you've gone from like hunting foxes and being a regular person to these moments of true sort of regular human triumph, as opposed to superhero triumph that you get so used to in these games.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I just did a side quest. I'm helping the lady at the bathhouse in Kuttenberg, and you have to fight a duel on behalf of this noble. And in the duel, you're fighting against a guy who's in full plate armor, and you have no armor, like you're not allowed to wear any. And it's really freaking hard because he takes almost no damage from almost every hit that you give him because he's wearing full plate armor. And it really does kind of, it felt like a great triumph when I finally beat him, even though I'm really late in the game and generally my Henry is pretty mighty and I can mess up most guys. So it's very good at putting you in those situations. So let's talk about the story some, because the writing and the story in this game, I mean, that's maybe my favorite thing about it. While we've talked about the simulation so much and, the combat, like those are really interesting parts of this game, but the story, the grounded historical nature of it, the world building, Henry as a character, there's so much interesting going on with this story. And I think that in particular, because we have Tom and Matthew here, we have like the two writers of The Writer Will Do Something playing a game with this much writing in it. I gather this game has like one of the longest scripts of all time, and also writing of this quality and with this much variance. I'm curious, as writers, what the two of you think of it. Matthew, maybe you go first.
This is something that we talked about a little bit, but like this game really takes its time with dialogue.
Yeah.
And it does in dialogue, a conversation that almost any other game would whittle down to a couple sentences because we don't need to take that time. This game just kind of luxuriates in just lots and lots of dialogue. They're perfectly fine having scenes go on twice or even 3 times longer than you would think an equivalent scene would in a comparable like AAA game. And you can just get into these long conversations with people about all kinds of not random topics, but topics that are maybe a little bit tangential to the actual story. And it just seems to be a priority for them that to have this much investment in that, in the ability to have those conversations.
I would say the script is never worse than pretty good, and often it's excellent. What I was most impressed by was how genuinely complicated a lot of the game's morality was. I've had this long-standing theory, which I've written about glancingly, is that games, a lot of exciting development right now is going on in countries of the former Soviet sphere, Poland, Czech Republic, and I often like the Metro games. Those are all made by people my age who kind of grew up in the shadow of a totalitarian empire. And I feel like I don't think it's a coincidence that Metro and Witcher and this game, they approach the question of human morality and from a much more interesting angle than we in the West do. In a Mass Effect game, it's like slap the reporter, kiss the reporter. Like it's the moral quandaries they give you are so stupid. Whereas this game and the other games I mentioned, the moral quandaries are a lot messier and darker. And I think it's because if you grew up, and I say this having lived in the former Soviet Union, people who grew up in that environment, Hannah Arendt writes this, that like growing up in a totalitarian system, to be a good person means you're constantly lying and cheating and being dishonest. Like it's a system that just forces like a layer of dishonesty on you, whether you're a good person or a bad person. It just corrupts you right down to, your very atoms. And I don't think it is a coincidence that the children of that, of the children of the children of the people who have the last sort of vivid memories of that system at its worst, approach human morality from a much more kind of rich and chewy and interesting direction. And over in this game, you get a quandary where there's just two bad choices. And, and you feel genuinely awful about making a decision. Very few games give me that feeling. And why don't they give you that feeling? Oh, I've been in these meetings. Well, we can't do this because the player will feel demotivated or the player will feel like his actions don't matter. Dude, the way players are put on these glorious pedestals like little children who've eaten all their vegetables is so infantilizing and dull and boring. And Matthew can back me up in this, I'm sure. And that the Western game makers' fear of the player ever feeling like anything other than the biggest boy at school really leads you into just a lot of pretty fucking rote and boring kind of narrative schema. And it makes me sad and depressed because we all know games, because of their very interactive nature, they're capable of providing a much brighter, darker catharsis.
I think that the two things that you each just said, so Matthew, what you were talking about with like the sheer quantity of the writing, and Tom, what you were saying with like the complexity of it, I think those things are related. There's definitely a feeling playing this game like there's just so much writing that as a result, it's allowed to have a lot more texture. Because in something like a Mass Effect, like a Western style game, which I love those games, they're great, but the dialogue comes at you, it feels like rat-a-tat compared to playing Kingdom Come Deliverance II. Like, and it's a pacing that I've just gotten used to with video games. Liam, I'm sure this is something that you've encountered as a voice actor, where a lot of the line reads that you're giving are fairly short if you're in that kind of a game, like anything, with like a dialogue system, because, each line is just going to be fairly short. It's not going to be a paragraph the way that it is in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to me playing this game for the same reasons that, often in RPGs and many games, I suppose, you have there's so many dialogue tree options, and generally you're like, that's the quest one, I'll do that one. And if I have time, I guess I'll hear about what his life is and what they do for, fun, and it's irrelevant. Whereas this, I felt it was far more complex. And yeah, again, speaking to Tom's conversation about the morality of it, I didn't feel that the choices were always obvious, but then also not like hidden for the sake of it. But also you didn't feel like each dialogue tree was just like, this is what this one does. This is the functional one in the game, and these are just fluff essentially, or color. It was just like. So I felt more inclined to look through the stories and enrich myself with those stories, because it's rare in these games. In my experience making them, certainly in the Western AAA world, there is, I guess, a prevailing sense that players want to get back on the sticks and get back into the game as fast as they can. And I mean, I'm interested. That may be true to a degree. There may be actual. I guess part of that whole struggle is, art versus business. Is that there probably is real metrics saying that a game that's being brave, like Kingdom Come, will turn off a lot of players for the exact reason where they're like, oh, click, 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 click. Let's get back to stabbing somebody, which is a shame to me because I love telling stories. And a lot of the games that I've done in the past, there is that sense of like, let's keep this moving and let's just be succinct and get the player back into the action so they can start feeling like the hero and the protagonist and not part of this world in a more, discreet sort of sense, where I feel very much that Henry very much feels like one person in a very big world, not the person in it's a world made for him. Yeah. And so there's a joy in that. There's a certain joy and uniqueness.
That's right.
That's definitely a similarity this game has with The Witcher 3, which is always something I appreciated about that game, that Geralt of Rivia is like, he's a very powerful guy. He's an important figure, but he's also kind of the guy next to the person. Like, he's helping the emperor, he's helping the woman who's going to help save the world. Like, he's always kind of in the background. And that winds up actually being a more interesting story than he is the chosen one who's going to save everything. And yeah, Henry, I mean, certainly, like, Henry's not even, noble. Like, he's kind of as elevated an everyman as there can be, and then that really puts him in an interesting place in the story. And related to the pacing and the dialogue, I should mention something. I played this game in a kind of distinct way, at least for me. I turned off subtitles but played in English, so I had to listen to everything. Like, I couldn't skip through dialogue. So because, as we've mentioned, there are these conversations where when another game would have one or two sentences, this game will just go. And then Henry will ask a follow-up. And then the character will keep talking. And then someone else will interject. And then Henry will talk. And, that's one dialogue interaction. So I just sit there for a long time just watching them talk about this guy and how, well, we thought he was actually working for, Wenceslas, but he wasn't really. He's actually this other guy. And, he knew my father. But then it just goes and goes and goes. And I have to pay attention and listen. And I'm finding that by not having the subtitles, I just can't do the thing I sometimes do where I'll skip through dialogue. And as a result, it's really grounded me in the writing in a way that I've at least found very cool. Matthew, I think, so you've been playing with the Czech audio track, and I'm curious what that has been like for you.
I played the entire game in Czech with subtitles.
So how was that?
It was great. I mean, I kind of missed out on some, when someone just kind of passes you by and they have some ambient dialogue. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they said.
Right.
But man, it was great actually. And I recommend it because it was just so, I don't know, it just felt right. Especially those, in the main quest, those swarthy guys you collect together to do this really dirty job. They're all drunk and swearing at each other in an Eastern European language. It's perfect, right? It just feels right. And kind of all of the other language stuff too is still in the other languages. So, not only is there Czech, right, but there's German, there's a little bit of Italian later on. And then there's an entire, no spoiler alert, I guess, but there's an entire huge conversation in Latin, in ecclesiastical Latin, because you're doing a thing with priests. So I don't know, that whole, it was part of the immersion for me to be in that world, to just have this language around me, even though I didn't understand a single thing about what they were saying.
It's funny. It's kind of the opposite to the approach I took, only because you can only read the subtitles to get the information, and yet it's also immersive, right, in its way. And yeah, it's funny. I mean, in the English track, a lot of people have English accents, which kind of grounds it in the familiar fantasy of England, because so much fantasy, especially like Arthurian, legends, and just a lot of games that I've played are set in England during, medieval times. So to be hearing those accents kind of keeps me in that familiar place. And I do have to say, Tom McKay, the actor who plays Henry, is so
wonderful,
great.
Wow.
It's such a good performance. And like the facial animations along with his voice acting are just endlessly great. And I really love him. It's actually really similar to what Doug Cockle does as Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher 3. The performances are different qualitatively, but they fulfill a similar function in how they elevate the game.
Yeah, what I love about Geralt and about my Henry, at least, because Henry can be somewhat different depending on how you play him. Geralt is a tough guy. He's like a badass. But whenever he deals with women or children or animals in the Witcher game, he's so gentle.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just so lovely as a character in that way. And I love how Henry has this, like, seems like fairness means something to Henry, and just decency means something to Henry. And like,
We had a scholar, didn't we?
yeah, my Henry, I built, it was an intellectual and he was an agnostic. And
Nice.
He was the lone agnostic in this world of Christianity. And I always had my Henry voice skepticism for the church's positions and whatever it came up.
There's one, he has the little animations, like there's the one he does like this. There's one where he's like this. And anytime he's doing it, he's like backed up with his, I should describe to listeners, he's backed up like holding one hand in his elbow, and he has like a finger under his chin kind of. And it's when he's about to say, well, actually, and there's the best lines of dialogue always come when he's like in this pose. Some people in our Discord were talking about this, and they were totally right. It's very funny.
Yeah, I was very sad to see that Mr. McKay was not, even though I think awards are all bullshit and based on nothing, that he did not get a nomination to the Game Awards for Best Vocal Performance.
Oh, yeah, that's true, huh? He didn't get nominated. Yes, he definitely deserved a Game Award.
Wait, he didn't get nominated? I thought he did. He didn't?
No, and Aaron Paul didn't either for Dispatch. There are definitely some notable
these are
notable
terrible
oversights
things to
at the
know.
Game Awards.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That's a whole separate podcast though.
But was he nominated for a Golden Joystick Award? I'm sure I saw him nominated for something of merit.
It
No, it doesn't
been,
matter.
yeah.
It makes me sad.
So Tom, you mentioned the religious aspect of this game, and I think that's another thing that's very interesting, and I know that's something that you have found particularly striking about this game.
Well, Matthew should speak to this first, because he sent me a beautiful text just a couple of days ago about...
That's right. Yeah, I told Tom, this is like, in a weird way, this is like the most Christian video game I've ever played. And it's not because it's proselytizing, it's because it's just depicts a world that's just suffused with Christianity. And it doesn't, it doesn't seem to take necessarily a particular side of, you can be doubtful, it shows like sort of negative aspects of the church, but it also shows just that it's just part of the texture of everybody's daily life. And you can be, a more religious Henry if you want to. You can get this ability, pray, and you can cross yourself and pray at a shrine, and you have to actually say the entire prayer. If you get up and leave, you don't get the buff that the prayer gives you. So you have to sit there and listen to him. Yeah, exactly. You have to listen to him say the whole thing. And then there's this entire sequence, like I was saying earlier, there's this entire sequence that's where they're all speaking Latin to each other for lines and lines and lines. And so it's just part of the world, and they do a very good job of depicting that, and they don't shy away from it at all. I think a lot of other big AAA games set in times where religion was a huge part of society and life. I always think about the Assassin's Creed games, like in contrast to this, right? They treat the topic with kid gloves, right? They're kind of like, there's a big disclaimer at the beginning saying like, well, we lots of different viewpoints and blah blah blah, and they're clearly worried about being criticized for this. But this kind of goes all in on depicting this world as they interpreted it was, and it's the richer for it, I think.
And the frankness with which they treat anti-Semitism too is really interesting. Like it becomes a very big part of the game near the end, and it provides one of its most powerful emotional catharses. So it's not like the game is anti-Semitic, but it acknowledges that most people alive at this time were hideously anti-Semitic. Its view of women. Yes, there are some women who like do a bunch of active shit in this game, but like generally speaking, the women have the roles that they would have been forced upon them, at the time. And like it makes a real commitment to the historical reality of it. And I'm not saying that's great, but I am saying that I do admire that it wasn't afraid to do that. Again, like I cannot imagine a group of modern day game writers even being interested in writing such a straight-faced portrayal of normative Christian belief without wanting to pick at it and dissect it. And like the problem with historical fiction is that it's written by people who know how it all ended up. And I think historical fiction becomes truly transcendent when the people writing it manage to forget they know where everything lines up. And when they forget everything lines up, the characters are allowed to not know what's going to happen. And I think you can only truly write effective historical fiction when you will yourself into a state of almost intellectual oblivion about what lays beyond the parameters of the period you're writing about.
That's interesting. That's well put. I appreciate on a much more surface level just how you'll be walking around the world and someone will go, Jesus Christ, be praised. Every time I hear it, I think that something horrible has happened or they're angry. And then I realize, no, this is just something that someone is saying. It feels a little bit like maybe the writers are having a little bit of fun. But it is true to the world. And something that I like about this game's approach to spirituality that sort of dovetails with what you have both said is that I like that there are a variety of different beliefs and superstitions. There are non-Christian beliefs as well. And that you always have to engage with them in this way that treats them as though, not as though they're true, but as though the people believe them and that matters. So someone says, well, I can't give you this ring because it has a curse on it. Then Henry just has to accept that they believe that. And then
just deal with that.
Well, because you probably would, though. That's what I love about it. I feel like it's
exactly, yes.
I think, as similar to what the others were saying, it's like, I think it's super important that when engaging in history, you don't doctor it to fit a more convenient truth that you know now. That obviously, we've come a long way since that time. But to then revise the character's understanding of the world to fit a modern sensibility of the world, I feel is dishonest and prevents us today having a better discourse about it, because I do really respect how non-judgmental and how honest for the period so much of Kingdom Come is at least attempting to be, so that you can now, we're talking about anti-Semitism and stuff like that, as a result of it sort of attempting to tell it how it was as close as they were able to, you can have a conversation now about how things have changed or not changed, as opposed to having that already pre-made, your characters, like Tom said, knowing, having a knowing wink towards, well, he's our hero character, so he'd know better than that. He wouldn't. He wouldn't know better than that.
He wouldn't.
He and if that in that mission where that guy won't give up that rock because the girl wants to get pregnant and she's like, I need the rock to be pregnant. He's like, well, I'm only strong because I have the rock. So and Henry isn't like rocks. He's like, absolutely, 100%. I've heard those rocks are awesome. And you're like, of course, because of course he would. And I think it's richer for it because you can then either go, maybe he's onto something, or have a discussion about how crazy it was that people believed rocks gave you superpowers, or anything like that, because the characters live in the real world that they would have existed in at that time, as close as you could imagine, I suppose, or as far as you're able to imagine, perhaps, from this distance.
Yeah, it fits in well also with how the game has no actual magic in it, and yet there is magic of a sort at every time. Like, you're constantly engaging with the supernatural. There's a whole quest line where people saw this revenant, like this ghost, and no one really knows what it was, but everyone tells you this different version of a story where there was a ghost and there was a horrifying vision. It was a demon, and you have to really engage with people on their terms and what they believe a demon is. You can't just start talking about it in the open and saying, "Oh, you saw a demon," and they're like, "Dude."
Yeah, well, that's because magic does exist in this world, though.
Right.
Like, it does exist because in this world, for most of the characters, Christianity isn't just like a great idea. It's real. It's absolutely true.
Right.
And the characters honor that for the most part. If they believe it, they do worry about if they say the wrong thing, God will smite them or send them to hell and things like that. And therefore, the magic that is inherent in that belief system, so you can exist in that way. But there is another quest where you have to go into the sewers because there's some hideous demon down there. And it turns out, spoiler alert, I think it's a knight or something who swore an oath to protect them from some other horrible. But it allows magic to exist because in their world, magic through the form of faith and belief is absolutely real. So unlike now where there might be a lot of cynicism about stuff like that, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, curse me to hell, sure, buddy. That would have been the worst thing that's ever happened, and their whole family would have heard about it, and they'd have to disown them or something, And so it creates a world where magic is alive in a magicless game, where there's no spell, sort of like spells to cast. It feels like you could just say to a character, I curse you, and that's in itself a magic you've performed. It's cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's totally true. And then, of course, this is the time where these legends were born, right? It totally makes sense. Like that these people are weaving legends out of their everyday life. They're constantly elevating things in that way. And then that just informed everything about the way that they experience the world. Well, we could talk about this game forever. This has been fantastic. I'm so glad to have had three fellow veterans with me here. Let's see if you guys have any final stories, anything that you want to share. Tom, it looks like maybe you have something.
I do. My daughter watched me play this game a lot. He called it Medieval Peasant Simulator.
That's what I call it. I think I call it that because of you.
And I knew there was some adult content in it, but my Henry was mostly pretty chaste. I just didn't go down that path with him because I didn't think that was his vibe. And there's a part near the end of the game where he can kiss a woman in a certain circumstance. And my daughter was like, ew, you're going to kiss the lady? And I'm like, we're just going to do this and we're going to get through it. And then they kiss and then cut to Henry thrusting away on top of this woman and one of the hardest core video game sex scenes I've ever seen.
Oh, really?
She's 11 years old. She's screaming. Trisha, my partner, looks up from the couch. She's screaming. I'm like, oh my God, turn this off. And it was one of the more amusing mishaps I've had in my video game playing career.
So game of the year is what you're saying. Game of the year 2020.
Game of the year.
10 out of 10.
Every time this happened, every experience he had was not one of the experiences I was there for. I don't think I ever saw Henry do anything of any note in that regard.
Yeah.
Tom would always be like, guess what just happened? I was like, oh, okay. 0 stars.
Liam and Matthew, any
Incredible.
final thoughts on Kingdom Come Deliverance II?
I really respect this game enormously, just for its its ambition and its willingness to do things that other games wouldn't, with the kind of scale that it has. I'm blanking on anything other than the thing that I've already talked about twice now, which is that there's a huge scene where everyone just speaks Latin.
Were you moved by the ending, Matthew? Did you find it moving?
Yes, I was actually. The game actually has a moral opinion. And that's also something that you don't see in a lot of big budget entertainment, especially Western entertainment. It turns out, the game kind of withholds it for much of the game, but it's there. And in the end, it kind of tells you a little bit about what it thought, the game thought. And that's, in a world of like kind of BioShock style, like everything, both anything is bad, trying anything, doing anything is bad. Like this game actually really stands up for doing the right thing and or trying to do the right thing in a completely fucked up situation, which the game acknowledges it has created for you. And so it's kind of, I think it's brave in that way for saying, ultimately, at the very end of everything, all those millions of words and hundreds of hours later, it kind of says, hey, you should do the right thing. And that's a very surprising thing to me in this day and age.
Nice. Liam, any final thoughts?
Oh no, I think they've said it better than I could, but it's a triumph of a game because it is so unusual and so unique, and seems like I keep thinking of like the meetings you would have in perhaps a Western game studio and how impossible any of it would have been. There would have been no way this game would have been created in so many other environments, anything like the game.
They would have fired Gustav on the first day. Like,
Gustav was unemployed day one. He's not celebrated like he is in this company. Yeah. No, he's no, but I probably have to look back to like Ultima 7 when I was so willing to just engage with a game and its strangeness and walk around for 2 hours to get to the other side of the map to do something, you know, and just be cool with it, and to just engage with characters and see what they have to say. You know, maybe that speaks to my becoming, immune to the storytelling of games over time. But I tried to hate it so much, like so hard, and it's incredible how it stuck to its guns so strongly that it won me, and it sounds like every other long-term player of this game has some experience of like, whoa, what is it? What are they doing? To going, oh, they're doing something truly special. It's a great game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing, Kirk. I've spent the last 15 years of my life on and off writing mostly big budget video games. And it's very hard for me to want to play a story-based game anymore. Most of what I play these days is shared world, kind of emergent narrative generating games,
or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Helldivers, Sea of Thieves. Your favorite game of all time.
I start playing a narrative game. This has been going on for years. I start playing a narrative game, and I'm like, yeah, this is cool, and then I just kind of just piece out of it at a certain point. It's hard to get me over the hump on them anymore, and this game pulled me back into just a love of falling into a game narrative. And man, am I grateful for that, because I thought that the spell had been permanently broken. And it turns out it wasn't. I was just sick of the same old thing. And I say that having written a bunch of the same old thing myself. And I'm really grateful to it for that reason.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Tom Bissell, Liam McIntyre, Matthew SEIJI Burns, thank you all so much for coming on the show. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Kirk.
It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Triple Click is produced by Jason Schreier, Maddie Myers, and me, Kirk Hamilton. I edit and mix the show and also wrote our theme music. Our show art is by Tom DJ. Some of the games and products we talked about on this episode may have been sent to us for free for review consideration. You can find a link to our ethics policy in the show notes. Triple Click is a proud member of the Maximum Fun Podcast Network, and if you like our show, we hope you'll consider supporting us by becoming a member at MaximumFun.org/join. Email us at tripleclick@MaximumFun.org and find links to our merch store and our Discord server in the show notes. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported
directly
by you.